Well, good morning, everyone. This is Chris Joslyn again, your host for the Chris Joslyn Show, coming at you, as always, sponsored by iLevelLogistics.com, a place you can go to get your aggregated, curated, and created content specifically about the transportation logistics industry, supply chain in general, for those inside the industry to further expand your knowledge, and those outside the industry that want to have a peek behind the curtain on what makes supply chain run and sometimes what makes it not run so well. And today we're going to continue our ongoing conversation with one of the partners of Orion Solutions Group, one of our sponsors, and discuss kind of whatever comes to mind. So without further ado, let's be joined again by Mr. Dave Porter. I think it's interesting because my take on big data is that, at least initially, for those that compile it, it's only as valuable as the history it's putting together, because that's all big data really is compiling historical tendencies and trends and patterns and all that other stuff that you can look into. I think the problem with a lot of people managing big data is they don't apply what they really want to have happen from it. They apply recognition of those patterns to profit better or become more efficient or whatever the case may be. But you have to layer across on top of that something that indicates where you want to go with your company or with civilization or whatever the case may be. And I think that's missing a lot of times.
Yeah, I think it's hard because the user, the data, let's call it the decision maker, right? So the decision maker typically isn't the person that knows how to extract the data from the database, right? And so then it becomes okay, you have a good database, you captured all the data points that could tell the story. And then do you even know what to ask for from whoever extracts that data for you? And then I always love it when the person that is doing that job has a good understanding of the business. So even if you've asked for something, they say, you know what, this person probably actually could use this, and brings you all that information so you can figure out the trends.
Right. And if you have somebody that's an expert at extracting the data and going over it and applying some kind of analysis to it, what you need is whoever has the vision for what the progress of that company should be needs to tell those people, this is what I'm trying to gather from it. If you see patterns like this, what does that allow us to do if our end goal is, X, Y, Z, whatever that is? And
it's hard to get there, but I think once you get there, then you have it. Then you have it, and it's super. It's really powerful. Mm-hmm. When you're running a larger organization, you can't really manage all the people. You manage through the data, the story that data tells you. And so it has to be accurate, and you have to have all the right data telling you the right story.
Yeah. And then on top of that, you have to be really careful how you consider the people that are working with and for you, and especially in a large company, that you may have to analyze them as part of the data set, but you can't treat them that way, which is one of the articles that went on our site the other day was about quiet quitting. We did a little analysis on that, and there was some information there, and it's very interesting. And I think our entire lives, we've all known people that we've worked with that they weren't working. They were quiet quitting as you go, right? It's it's something that's been there a long time, but it's coming out of the woodwork in a way that we haven't noticed as much before because of all the other stuff that's going on.
So I think an interesting form of quiet quitting, which this will be an oxymoron, but I think there's a lot of people that might be quiet quitting one job, but it's because they actually have two jobs. They're working remotely and they've got their gig on the side. They're doing that. So while it seems like they're lazy or they're not really working, they're working quite hard, but they're working two jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're working two jobs, or they're trying to justify their exodus, right? Which is a human nature kind of thing, right? If you really want to go, if you're really disappointed in the culture of a company or the direction your career's going, or the fact that maybe you're, a Gen X or Gen Y or whatever the Gen is these days, and you figure you're going to have 15 careers instead of two, that
Right.
there's a justification to I don't know. It's funny because you and I have talked about this way in the past. If things were running along in a certain direction, career wise, or in trying to develop sales maybe, or something along those lines, oftentimes, depending on the personality, people will put themselves kind of in a corner and give themselves only one direction out. And you do that by managing those other pieces that are possible paths for you. And, quiet quitters, if they really want to quit and move on to something else and get a hold of Orion and say, hey, you know what, I want to be this over at this company, then it's easier for them to get pushed out a door than it is for them to walk out a door.
Yeah, they're interesting times. And I think all this is a lot easier to do in a remote environment. I think you just become less associated with a company in a remote environment, particularly if you're used to working in a traditional environment.
So
if you're used to going to the office.
Dave, what is your take on that specific element? Because I know I have my ways of viewing that, but what do you think about this? I mean, I understand the need to have done all this remote stuff, but now that we're kind of coming out of the woods, what is your take on remote versus office?
Yeah, I think that people have overestimated how effective it is, and I think in the short run it can be very effective. I think we all saw that. Hey, we can take an established group of people and move them to their homes, and they can continue to collaborate and work effectively. We can, but I think it's a stopgap. I don't think it's generally a long-term strategy that's effective as the true collaboration that you get in an environment where everybody is physically together. And I think that trying to scale an organization, train people, bring new people into an organization is much more difficult to do as well remotely as it is in office. Now, that being said, right now, employees kind of hold the power. And if they want to work remote and you want to have a company, then you've got to find a way to make it work. Because as a recruiter, I can tell you, especially amongst the, let's say, recent college grads set up to 30 ballpark, there's a strong preference amongst many of them to work remotely. They like it. And for
or at
many
least
of them,
a hybrid, right?
Or hybrid, or at least a hybrid, yeah, where they only have to go to the office maybe once or twice a week, right?
Yeah.
But, my background in third-party logistics, so think about like a truck brokerage operation, for example, right? I will take a group of those people in an office, working, collaborating together, overhearing each other's conversations, all that stuff, the market intelligence, what's going on with demand and everything. You're overhearing all this stuff real time. I'll take that group and put them against a remote group any day of the week,
Yeah.
So we operate in a live environment, in office environment. And I think we're really effective that way. But, but we have our other office works largely remote, and they're also effective. I don't know.
I think
Maybe it's some
I look
preference. I
at
don't
it,
know.
and I think you have to evaluate the people that are working with you because there are
Yes.
definitely people that require an on-site structure. Yeah, and not just for the things you mentioned, though. I think they're very important. Kind of, it's called the water cooler effect or something like that. I've heard in the
Yeah,
past where
exactly.
you hear all this kind of, and brokerage is a great example because I remember way back when I set up a brokerage up in the Northwest, and had very few people to do it with, but the whole tenant that I was looking at, and I think you did the same when you were doing some of this kind of stuff as well. You kind of set up the vendor team and the customer team, right? And they were talking to these people and basically cross talking with each other to try to develop opportunities through those conversations. You can't do that. I mean, technologies are great that you and I can do this, that you can do this with a
Yeah.
team of people at any time and discuss important topics. But the personnel you have, there has to be measurements to see how they achieve the goals you're looking for. And it has to be compared to what our history is, and that's an on-site history in an office. So if the measurement to be a customer service person was these three things, and you're able to accomplish those three things in 6 hours at home without a commute instead of 8 hours at the office, well, that's awesome. That's great.
That's great. Yeah.
But how you measure those things and how you develop that kind of thing is, I think, still in process. It's still unknown. And
Yeah, I think intensely collaborative environments just suffer in a remote environment. And
mhm.
I know, we all have like these chat things, but personally, I think there's huge power in focus. And when I'm trying to get something done, I keep getting all these little messages, and everybody expects an instant response. It's like, I don't like to work that way, and I don't think it's effective. And I'm older. I
I was
get
going to
it,
say, I was
but
just going to say that's because you and I are old.
yeah, I know that has something to do with it, but I don't know. And then it's just I don't think it's effective. I would love to be persuaded that for true collaborative, real time collaborative work, that it's as effective. I don't see how it can be, but especially in certain locations where the drive is horrible and you're losing an hour each way. We're in LA, right? Super easy
Mhm.
to imagine that, right? Chicago's the same way. Atlanta's the same way. There's lots of places where it's like that. So losing 2 hours of efficiency is a bad thing too. But in reality, it shouldn't be losing 2 hours of efficiency, because if you're working remote, you shouldn't be working at home, although a lot of people do 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day, right? That commute shouldn't be owned by the company. It should be owned by you. That should be, and I think that is the benefit and why people like doing it.
Right. Right. Well, and especially if they turn the corner in LA and see gas at $7 an hour or gallon, right?
And that's the other
That's
thing.
yeah. Yeah, that goes back to our
Oh,
conversation last week or 2 weeks ago about get an EV. So
yes. Yeah. Yeah,
and
exactly.
there is actually, depending on the type of business you're in and in focus you have to develop and collaboration you are with your teammates, there is a nice thing about having a little time for decompressing on your way to or from the office.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of components that need to be sorted out. And the funny thing is we're talking about this because we see both sides of it. We've developed our careers through an on-site presence and a collaborative effort. And actually during a time when the technologies were not very good for you to communicate with anybody at any time, unless you had a giant brick phone held to your head. Right. So,
Yeah, that's
so
right.
of course, now the people coming out of university or getting into our industry at 20 years old or 19 years old or whatever it is, this is going to be a viewpoint they've always had. They're always going to look at this perspective as the thing that they notice they like the most, and they're going to push against things that are more difficult than that.
I will say that a lot of our clients continue to, I'll say, allow for remote work, but they really want them in the office.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, if you're managing your career as a younger person, the just incidental conversations you have with the higher ups because you are in the office. Like those higher ups may not be on your Zoom call, right? But you might run into them in the office and have an opportunity to develop relationships. They can see how you work and things like that. I think there's opportunity for maybe more mentorship in a live environment as well. So if I was managing my career as an earlier professional, I would look for the opportunity to be around others in a live environment, particularly the more successful people or people that could help me with my career. I think that what we're going to see is, yeah, you can work remotely, and that's fine. I don't think those people are going to ascend in the companies as quickly as the people that are at home.
Interestingly to me, I also see the counter to that, where the prevalent desire for an employee is to be primarily remote. And I'm sure you get people all the time through your business, and you're probably having to twist that's not a good way to put it. I was going to say twist the arms of the people that are trying to hire people and say, hey, this guy is great, but he or she needs to be 3 days in, 2 days out.
We have to present that option.
Right.
But everything that I said, I'll take the awesome person at home as opposed to like an average person, in the office. There's no question.
That's the thing that I get confused at, though, because you would think the awesome person is the one that wants to develop a career that continues to flourish and move up a ladder of sorts within those companies. And yet the idea of remote or even a hybrid situation with remote and office lends itself to the idea that those people are not going to settle in on a career with a company, that a company is more of a flexible item in their career path than it used to be. It used to be your career was designed around a company, right?
Oh, yeah.
And now your career may be designed around an industry and not a company, which goes to the whole quitting thing that we've talked about. So I think it's changing beyond what we can see is happening. And I think that, and it comes down, you said it a few minutes ago, the power and the leverage is in the hands of the workers, the working force right now. And those things swing in all directions. And of course, as us baby boomers retire and move out of the whole thing, there's a big gap between us and the volume of people that are in what is it? Generation? What's the one after us? Is it Generation X? I think it is.
I don't know what
There's
one we're
a
on now.
huge. Yeah, I see. Yeah, you can tell we're boomers. I don't know. Generation X, B, Y. I don't know. Whatever. But there is a big gap, and the fill for that gap from a people standpoint doesn't come till the generation after that. So there's this 20-year, 15-year gap in age groups from the lower end, which is you and me in the baby boomers, to the high end of the generation that has as many people. So how do we bridge that gap, right? You bridge it by making work easy.
It's very different industries have different tolerances for remote work than other ones, right? And it seems like the more cutting edge, tech oriented type positions and companies and industries are much more remote friendly. And in fact, the companies are actually designed, for remote work almost entirely. And I think it just depends. And it seems to me that some of the older, more established companies that we work with, publicly traded, large companies have been around 30, 40 years. They want people in the office more so than the startups and the more tech-oriented type companies. There's definitely that trend.
Do you think, based on this kind of stuff we're talking about, that we're going to see like the second coming of the kind of the WeWork infusion of community? I mean, you think about these high tech companies, and you'd walk into one, and there's a coffee bar over there, and there's beanbag chairs to flop into, and there's ping pong tables everywhere, and there's music going, and this, and that was designed for the younger crowd that needed to feel they were part of a fraternity or a sorority or a club, right? I mean,
Right.
in my mind, that's what it's about. It's to show that off and to draw them into a place where those collaborative things can happen.
Exactly.
So now you move off to remote, which is desired by these people. And if they're task oriented, great. But I don't think that's the majority of people. I think the majority of people are, well, I think I misspoke. You can be task oriented if you're given tasks too. But I think most workers require some framework of being managed to get their jobs done. There are people that are outliers, and those people are great at home. But so I look at it and I go, okay, I don't know if you ever watched the Netflix special on WeWork, or there's all kinds of things, that whole
I know about it. One of my sons worked at a WeWork for quite some time.
That guy got kind of over his skis on, as a lot of these people do, in terms of their charisma taking over the business framework. And
as I understood it, I mean, it was an old line concept. We're basically renting space, but it's in a tech environment. So somehow he got some kind of tech valuation because it was techie companies that were working there, and the whole thing was wildly overvalued from what I could see.
Oh yeah, it was a unicorn valuation, and it was way higher than it. But the reason it gained so much traction is he created a dormitory type of environment for young people. I mean, there were, I don't know, there were all these get-togethers and all this environment of not collaboration but community. It was almost like he was starting a modern day high tech cult, in a way. And but I understood the premise of it, because how do you get people to stay how do you get people to stick to what you're trying to get them to do? And it's kind of like what we talk about with websites and things. It's one thing to get people to click on a website; it's another people get them to stay, to buy your product or service. So there's a click ratio, but there's also a stickiness factor that they talk about in tech, and you got to have both.
I think that's a challenge, right, for companies that are largely remote. How do you build that sense of community and being in the mission and the buy-in? It's a lot easier when you're in a physical office with posters and everything all over the place, and you're hearing this, you're immersed in a particular environment. But where you're at home in front of your laptop, how do you get sucked into the company's mission? And I've seen, companies do some pretty cool things with trips and, off-site meetings, and they still make a point of really getting together periodically. But that's going to be a challenge. I do think, though, that when the supply demand equation flips for employees, and let's say the unemployment rate goes up to 10% or something like that, it seems like we may be heading into a recession if we're not in a recession, and then you can argue what a recession is. But if that flips, I think a lot of this remote stuff's going to go away, because right now a lot of companies are just tolerating it because they have to in order to have employees just to operate.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If I was sitting on top of a large company and struggling with these personnel issues, you gotta go into, lack of a better way to put it, survival mode. You've got to acquiesce to a lot of the demands that are occurring to get the baseline of what your job, your business is supposed to do. And in the logistics space, it's even more interesting, because you have to have a big portion of the logistics industry, transportation industry, is drivers on the roads, right? There's no remoting that, at least until we start piloting those things independently, like we do drones, and that's
piloting
off in the future,
or 3D printing everything at home, or who knows what we'll be doing.
Exactly. Right? But for the time being, so when I look at the logistics industry, a lot of people are like, "Oh, we'll never go AI for years and years," and then I go, "Well, a train sort of is, if you look at it correctly." Think about the number of these giant 20,000, 24,000 TEU ships floating on the ocean. How many people are managing those ships at any given time? It's a very small crew. I mean, there's all kinds of these types of personnel efficiencies that have come into our space. So, and people will, it's not a true people diminishment, but when you outsource customer service to another country or something like that, which many people do, what you're doing is you're trading high dollar for lower dollar, even if it's more people, right?
Right.
So, it's an interesting transition that we're going through, and it's going to be fun to watch it happen. Hopefully I'll be watching it from my rocking chair.
Yeah, I think the transition, I don't think we'll ever be fully back in office. I think a hybrid strategy is what makes the most sense. Let people have some flexibility to do certain, block time types of work at home. And if they value that, I think that a smart company is, we're just in a different world now. Just as we're doing this, you probably remember like the first conference call that you were ever on, right? With the video conference call and how horrible it worked. And it was just like, oh my God, why don't we just pick up the phone? This is horrible. Now this is just as easy to do as a phone call. So I think about all the sales calls, Chris, you've been on, flying across the country, spending probably like roughly 3 days for an hour-and-a-half meeting. Right. And how unnecessary that was and how expensive that was and what a waste of time that was. I think a lot of that's gone too.
Yeah. Well, in the past, you would look at just as a perfect example, you got a pipeline of, possible clients that you're working on, jammed them all into Salesforce back in the day or whatever we did. Right. And the whole idea, and I remember because you were the one that hired me in the first place for, Bob and you, at Hub. And it was, get out in front of people 3 days a week. Monday, do your proposals. Friday, do your proposals, get a hold of people for the next week. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you're out in front of people. And it wasn't just because there was a numbers game part of that. You had to get enough in the pipeline to turn something out of the bottom of that funnel, right? But the aspect of getting in front of people and touching base with them personally, I don't know if you can replace that, because it's really, I mean, you said flying across the country for a 3-hour meeting. There were times where if you wouldn't have done that, you wouldn't have got the business, period. Because they didn't know who you were. But again, that's our perspective. Nowadays, people look at it and none of these people have time to visit you hardly ever unless they're...
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. People don't have the time to do that. And it was expected. I mean, it was almost like, oh, my rep never comes out and personally sees me, so I'm not getting good service. And they would give it to somebody that would come out. And people just had time for this kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But the great thing about the technology now is, we're a national firm. We do placements all over the country. And my clients, I see them now face to face, although through it's a screen, way more than I ever would have before, and in some ways my relationship, I feel like, is more genuine and better than it would have been in the old days when I did. A lot of these people I've never actually seen face to face, but we do have a relationship because of this.
It's going to be interesting when we get the Web 3.0 or whatever the case may be, because you talked about it a minute ago. I used to watch, a science fiction movie, and there would be somebody answering a little video at their door, and somebody's waiting outside. And I was like, that was before any of that stuff was around. I was like, man,
the Jetsons, right? Yeah.
Well, they better get their act together to be able to do those kinds of things with the technology available. And it seemed like that would never get here, and then it's here. So now you watch an interview with Zuckerberg or something like that, and now he says, put on these headphones / eyepieces and surround yourself with your entire team at the same time. And now you're an avatar, collaborating right there in the room with these other people. My age doesn't allow me to bridge that mental gap very well, right?
Yeah.
But it's coming. It's going to happen.
there's aspects of that. Do you have an Oculus, or have you spent
I
any
don't.
time?
I've looked at getting one. I've looked at it. I have not done it.
So I've had one, and it was, I have to admit, I used it like crazy at first, and it's been sitting in the case for the last several months. I haven't used it. There are some cool experiences that you can have. Like all of a sudden you're in the middle of some market in Pakistan, and you can look all around 360, and you're having that experience at a certain level. And that's really cool. But I don't think that people are going to want to strap something to their heads like that and collaborate like that. I think there's some applications for gamers, and companies can make a lot of money doing stuff like that. People like to do role play games and virtual worlds and stuff like that. But I don't know. I liked what Elon Musk said. He said, I was told when I grew up that don't sit too close to the TV. It'll ruin your eyes. And now we're supposed to strap these TVs to our face and spend hours like this and live our lives through this. It doesn't seem to make sense. I don't know. There's application for it. I think we're early stages on it, though.
Yeah, I think it's coming at us whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
It might not be a giant cumbersome thing on your head, right? It might just simply be a pair of glasses with the appropriate data built into them, right? So
I think it'll be an implant. I think we'll have
the
an
implant.
implant.
I got to tell you, I used to I still get Discover magazine. It's one of the few paper things I have sent to me. And long ago, it used to be called Omni. Back at university, I used to get that.
Yeah,
and
me too.
So I don't, and I remember an ad. This had to be in the 80s. And there was a picture of some model, some female model, her head. You couldn't see her eyes or anything, but you could see the side of her neck, and her hair was pulled back, and there was 3 buttons on the side of her neck. And they were for audio, for like headphone kind of thing, right? And I was like, oh man, they'll never do that kind of implant stuff. But the fact is whether something's implanted or not. I mean, I'm sitting here with a microphone on my face and headphones on. Now this is old school, right?
Yeah, but we are jacked into the everything. I mean, now I have to use this very slow finger interface, but
you say that with the finger interface. I know people that they just hit the little microphone all the time and just talk at your phone anytime.
I do that a lot too. It's better than it used to be, but I'm sure you use Siri as an example, or Alexa. Yeah. It doesn't always translate things real well. And, God forbid you fully rely on it translating what you're saying into it, and someone's going to get some weird message. Exactly. I think you sent me one.
I probably did. No, I put something on LinkedIn because I was sitting watching a panel. And
that's what it was.
It was about drivers, and it came out whatever. It's like, what? How did that happen? Anyway,
yeah, exactly.
You never know. But I guess the point is that these technologies, we see these advances, we see the jump, the leap to the full video conversations like this, or the leap to implants like the Neuralink that he can say what he wants about. Get in front of the Tesla. Musk can say what he wants about that, but he's experimenting with implants in the brain,
right.
or Neuralink. So, what's worse, what's better? Who the frick knows? The fact is human beings are going to push these envelopes no matter what, and how that trickles down to our ability to interact commerce is always very great interesting. The social aspect's very interesting as well. But the ability to transact business is it's just changing so rapidly. Last time we talked about, electric vehicles and some of the different efficiencies, especially with California, that you have to look at to try to identify where the costs are going up and how you can participate, and how it's, at least certain things are up to you, right? And I think these technologies, whether you're a first adopter or not, are going to impact all these things we do. They're just going to.
Oh, 100%. And right now, practically everybody, at least in the United States or the Western countries, has access to a computer. They own a computer. People do a wide range of things with those computers. Some of them start great businesses. Some people receive the equivalent or an actual PhD education, and other people look at porn all day, right? I mean, you can use this for whatever you want to use it for and advance yourself and civilization, everything with these tools, or you can just get weirder than you ever thought you could get. I think that the idea of these implants and superhumans, it's going to happen. And there's going to be people that are just amazing. They will use these tools to be at a level that is almost beyond our current imagination. And then there's going to be people that have it that just are stranger than we ever thought that they could be too. So all they are tools, and ultimately it's up to the person to make the most out of it. And they're just opportunities is really what it is.
That right there is a mantra that I have all the time when I talk to people within my circle about, you name it. You could almost name anything. And I always come back to the fact that these things, they're not intrinsically what we name them. None of them are. Your phone is the same way. Yeah, I used to say this all the time. You turn off your phone and put it down in your desk. It's a paperweight. That's all it is, because it's a tool. Those things are what you use them for. They are not what they are named to be. And it's the same with all this.
Having one doesn't change your life, and ultimately it's about yourself, your own self-discipline, your thirst for knowledge and progress and advancement, and what you use it for. Or it can be something that will take you down a path that will not be good.
Well, that's a wrap on another great conversation with Dave Porter. Again, thank you very much, Dave, for coming aboard and spending a little time and energy to give us your expertise and your thoughts about the topic of the day. As always, come be part of our community at iLevelLogistics.com. It is a community that's trying to grow, is trying to broadcast additional information about the supply chain transportation industry in all the platforms that are out there. Come see us on Apple Podcasts, come see us on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe. Be, like I say a moment ago, part of that community as it grows and further expands the knowledge of people that are in and outside the industry of supply chain. Thanks so much, and see you again next time on the next edition of The Chris Joslyn Show.